Report, your podcast covering all things Open Division and Contenders, the path to pro for Overwatch League. And here are your hosts, Thornrayne and Kyle Wynn. And welcome back for this week's episode of the Blackwatch Report, episode 22. Corey in the house. 23. I can't read. 23. Corey in the house. I'm your host, Thornrayne, and with me, as always, is Mr. Kyle Wynn. How you doing tonight, Kyle?
Great as always. Always here, ready to correct every single minor mistake and never let you live it down.
And that's all I ask for. Because it happens a lot. But I'm going to start it off with what we did this last week. Did a little more competitive with my son. Actually ran into another fellow podcaster in a match, and we both recognized each other. That's the first time I've had it happen. I've heard other shows talk about it. It was kind of cool. There's a local amusement park out by me, Cedar Point. It's like one of the top-rated amusement parks in the world, basically. And we've got season passes, and we went out there, and I was wearing my World Cup jersey, my Team USA jersey, and we're standing in the little restaurant waiting to get sat for lunch, and this guy goes, "Hey, do you think we got a shot this year?" And I'm like, I'm hesitant because most people don't recognize what it is. I thought he was just talking regular,
Right.
World Cup, and he goes, "No, the Overwatch World Cup. Do you think Team USA has got a shot?" And I was like, boom, let's go. So we sat in the lobby talking about World Cup and how Zachary's gonna pop off, and Korea's a big scary monster. And my daughter just gave me the stink eye because I always embarrass her when I talk about
Just
Overwatch.
dad nerd out.
Stop talking about video games, Dad. But other than that, like just a normal typical week watching Contenders and, checking out the tier 2 scene. How about you, Kyle?
Same. Lots of contender stuff. I was watching the Arrow breakdown of the Legion versus GGA match earlier, which was super duper interesting because all the players from, Elk was in there, Unko was in there, Blase was in there while the Arrow was like reviewing his team, which was kind of funny. And then before that, I've been doing now all four of me and my friends have GTA 5, and so we're finally playing all of the heists and stuff. Did that last night. I was screaming and yelling because they're super duper stressful, but we got a couple of them done. We're blazing through them. They're super fun. And then I've been playing Borderlands 1 as well, which is fun.
I have yet to play any Borderlands, and I've only ever played GTA on the PlayStation 4. I've thought about checking it out. It looks like fun.
Yeah.
But that's gonna move us right along. Again, no new iTunes reviews. Come on, people. It's not that hard. Just go review us. Tell us how bad we are. Tell us how good we are. Give us those stars. But other than that, we did see a bunch of movement over on Twitch and YouTube, so I'm going to run this down. On Twitch, we have Zeister and Canoe? I think that's how you say it. If I said it wrong, just correct me in the Discord and I will fix it. Following on Twitch, and then over on YouTube, we have 3 new subscribers. We have Braden Bollinger, Damian Kuhn, and Sin. Yes, that Damian Kuhn just so happens to be my son, who has now finally followed me after all of this time. He's a jerk. But other than that, we've got our Patreon. You can go over to patreon.com and drop a donation over there. As always, our news is brought to you by our Patreon. This week, the Patreon sponsor is none other than Mr. Shrugoff. You can become a Patreon over at patreon.com/blackwatchreports. And with that, let's get into the news. Kyle, take us away.
Cool. So breaking it down, another unfortunate thing for me, because now I have even less of a reason to watch these games. And by that, I mean, of course, we already only can watch NA Contenders as it is, but now there's English cover for both Chinese Contenders and South American Contenders. So there's like 5-6 different regions to watch, and I am just like overwhelmed with things to watch in terms of Contenders. And so
Yes.
I am super stoked on the, like, if the seasons get staggered like they did last year, where certain teams have playoffs and there's like nice breaks and stuff, it would be amazing to be able to watch like the playoffs of each, just maybe like semifinals and finals, of just see what the Chinese world is doing, see what the South American world is doing with Overwatch stuff. So it's really, really cool. So if you're interested in that, Broadcast GG will be doing that. And you can check out the stuff on Broadcast GG. But yeah, it's just more stuff to watch, unfortunately, for me.
Yeah, it was always nice because you could kind of avoid it because it's like, I can't understand what they're saying anyways, so
Yeah.
I'm not going to try to understand, the names and everything. Nope, now we can literally watch. Well, no, it would be 6 that we could watch because the Australian stream is also in English.
NA, EU, Korean, Australia, not Oceania, I don't think, or like South
No.
Pacific. But then we also have 6.
Yep. And I think there's only 7 total. So
Yes.
we're just missing the Oceanic division. And I'm sure at some point, once they can figure it out, Broadcast GG will probably cover that too.
Exactly.
But that's going to move us right along to our second bit of news here. And this is more a Overwatch League news, but we wanted to cover it here because the implications are huge. ESPN, ESPN2, Disney XD, and ABC will all start to broadcast some form of Overwatch League content. I know matches for the playoffs will be shown on ESPN 2, 3, and the flagship ESPN channel at different points during the playoffs. All of the matches will be on Disney XD, and then ABC looks to be having a special recap show at the end of the playoffs. So it's just getting the esport as a whole out there in front of more eyes, which is a fantastic thing. And, maybe one of these days we'll get to see, kind of like minor league baseball. We'll get to watch Contenders on like ABC or Disney XD. That'd be fantastic. Come on, Blizzard, hook it up. But that's going to be it for the rest of... Oh, sorry.
No,
I'll let you move us on.
Okay, I will then. Moving on to roster moves now. We have significantly less because Contenders is already rolling and teams don't really want to switch players a whole lot during. But that doesn't stop certain teams from doing that, because Crackinlackin has been released and Bernar has been added, who was subbed in last week, has been officially added to the Fusion University roster. I have some thoughts on this. People are asking, like, why would you ever do that? He was doing great. He was playing phenomenally. And he was, but they had to bring in Rowan at one point because, I think Crackinlackin slept through, like, the match that he was supposed to play with his team, which is, like, super frustrating if you're on his team. And you just like can't find this person, and you're like, okay, we need to fill the spot, and then you had to find a sub for that. So, it is kind of an unfortunate way that like really like that's the thing that's going to get you off of this team, is something kind of as trivial as like showing up. And I don't think it's purely just that reason. I assume there's other reasons as well, different things probably along the same vein. But come on, like, show up. You're on like one of the best Contenders teams. You had a pretty good, like, you were invited to do the World Cup. Like, you had options, you had reasons. Don't be super careless with it. But excited to see what Bernar can do. He's already looking pretty solid. Obviously, there's going to be a bit of a ramp up because I mentioned that in the Discord that like D.Va is one of those players that are like one of those heroes that you really kind of have to get a good idea of like the ebb and the flow of team movement and kind of realize how your team does things. With like widows and stuff, same way, you kind of have to get an idea of like how your team is going to play around you and stuff like that. But D.Va especially is like super duper team dependent, and so it'll take a little while for your team to kind of be able to play around you well and be able to play around your team to the most potential.
Yeah, when you change up, when you're used to playing one style of player and then you go to a new style of player, we'll see a little bit of a change. But so far, they seem to be managing that change pretty well, considering, we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But that's going to move us on to our next bit of news here. A little bit more news on Kragie over from the British Hurricane. A couple weeks ago, we saw that he was moved to the reserves roster. Well, now he's just been released. The writing was kind of on the wall. So Kragie is no longer with the British Hurricane, and I do believe I saw a looking for team tweet come out from Kragie.
I thought he was one of the players that like didn't want to like continue playing.
Did he announce that he was done, that he was retiring?
I don't think he was. He mentioned that he was kind of like burnt out. So I don't know for sure.
I'll have to double check on that and then tweet it out. All right.
Anyways, moving on to some other interesting. I don't even know what region this team is from. I gotta look this up real quick. The team Samsung Morningstars have released their black roster and retained their full blue roster.
I
all of
believe
these
they're
players,
EU.
Okay, why did I not like? Did they not make trials, or did they make trials? I just don't pay attention. I must have missed that.
Yeah, they were European. Despite qualifying for trial, Samsung Morningstars Blue failed to qualify for Contenders after going 2-5. So this is one of those teams that had two rosters, so they're dropping one and focusing on the other.
Okay, interesting. That was a team I didn't know very much about.
I recognized the name, but I didn't know that they were running two separate rosters. It always gets a little confusing when these orgs have, two teams going at the same time competing in the same tournaments, and they're, blues and reds and, ones and twos.
That, and it only says the blue roster was even in trials. They were just released the black roster, which...
Did they even make it out of open?
Yeah, who even are that? I don't even know.
But that's going to move us along. We're going to go down to Australia here. Dark-Sided picked up two new players. CantuS and Yuki, both formerly from Masterminds, also an Australian team. A note on Yuki, the DPS player, he is actually going to be playing for Team Australia in the Overwatch World Cup coming up here just in a few weeks, I do believe.
Yeah. And then our last bit of team news, we have reports that Jaru has finally found a team. He is now with the Skyfoxes, as is Retzi, previously of Simplicity, I believe.
Yes, of Simplicity.
And in that same vein, Far, who was on Skyfox, has been moved down to a sub role, allowing Jaru and Retzi to kind of take. I think there's Jaru, and then Boostio was the other one on this team,
DPS,
right?
Yep.
Yes. So I assume Jaru and Retzi and Boostio are going to be the main three, and then Far is only going to come in if someone's not there at all. So you have 4 DPS, 3 active at the moment.
And, just to bring this up again, this wouldn't have been a problem if they wouldn't have changed the roster roles, because Far is actually the 9th member, and you're no longer allowed to have 9 members. You're only allowed to have 8. So if they would have just left the rosters alone, we wouldn't have this problem. Because remember, rosters were 9, but they decided to change them.
Because they have DPS and Ace of Spades as their tanks.
Yep. So that's going to wrap up the news. There wasn't a whole lot of movement this week, considering we're already 1 week into Contenders. We're going to see a little bit less movement. But that takes us to our sponsor. You can break away from your normal energy and go rogue. Go to therogueenergy.com and use promo code BlackwatchReport at checkout for 10% off of your purchase. And that takes us to This Week in Overwatch, brought to you by Liquipedia. There were no tournaments this week. from July 8th to July 14th in the history of Overwatch. So it's all birthdays. So we're just going to say happy birthday to Mr. Reinforced. He is turning 23, or I'm sorry, turned 23 on July 8th. On July 9th, Landu, former support for 1246, it just turned 21. Then we have Caress, former support for AK Esports Club. He was turned 22 on July 10th. And then on July 11th, today, we have none other than Tizzy, the tank player for XL2 and former player for the London Spitfire. He is turning 21 today on July 12th. We have Toma, former support for Kick Esports Club, turning 26. And then we have Libero, DPS for the New York Excelsior. He's turning a whopping 19 years old. Yes, 19. All these young kids. I feel old. On July 13th.
I feel old because I'm older than Reinforced, which is weird as well. That's the weirdest thing for me. But and then even Yuki's a weird one as well. As I'll let you do real quick.
Yep.
Sorry.
On July 13th, speaking of, we have Kuki, the tank for the Seoul Dynasty. He's turning, now mind you, this is on the older end for Overwatch. He's turning 27.
It's ancient.
27. It's amazing how the ages work when it comes to esports. Once you break that 25 mark, you're considered, going downhill from there. And then we have Yayo, former tank for OMG and Team China in the Overwatch World Cup 2017, and he is turning 24 on July 14th. So wish all of them a very happy birthday this week. And that is going to take us into the quick play.
Cool. So I will break down the Korean region where we had a combination of the matches from last week that we did not cover because their schedule is kind of funky. And then the matches we had so far from this week, earlier this morning. So on July 7th, we saw Blossom fall 2-3 against Runaway, as well as Seven falling 1-2 against Element Mystic. MVP Space on July 8th fell to O2R 1-3. Metabellum took the win against X6 3-1. And then earlier today, like at 3 o'clock this morning, Runaway 4-0 WGS H2 and Element Mystic 4-0 Foxes.
And then over on the EU side, for the week 2 matches, July 9th, we saw Eagle Gaming 4-0ing the Copenhagen Flames. So all of those moves that they just did were for nothing. We have CIS Hope also going 4-0 against who? I'm not saying their name because I don't remember what it is. I know what it is. It's We Have Org. But it's just who? It's who? We've got Team Giganti taking on 1 point, and they win that 3-1. On July 10th, we have Orgless and Hungry beating Young and Beautiful 3-1. The British Hurricane, in a phenomenal reverse sweep, take out the Bazooka Puppies 3-2. And then we have the Angry Titans going up against Snakes, and they 4-0 them for your final match of week 2 over in European Contenders. That's going to take us down into the North American scene. On July 10th, we had Second Wind going up against Mayhem Academy. I had Second Wind taking this 3-2. Kyle had Mayhem Academy taking this 3-1. Kyle got it right. Well, kind of got it right.
Ish.
They were 4-0'd. Mayhem Academy 4-0'd Second Wind. So, Kyle, what's your analysis?
So, this week was a very interesting week. Not a lot of close games, but for this one, it was kind of interesting. We saw Aligned, who was the tank player from Berkeley, or UC Berkeley's TESPA team,
Yep.
who was the team that won 2 years in a row. So he's the main tank. Actually, I believe he was not a main tank. He was like a DPS, but he's subbing in on main tank for Mayhem Academy. Not exactly sure why, but Milky Man was not looking incredible before that. So maybe they're just like looking to have a new permanent main tank. He was in for Oasis, which was the first map, which Mayhem Academy took 2-0 in a pretty strong fashion. On King's Row, it got a little bit closer. Shadows had a lot of really, really good looks on Widowmaker, and was able to help his team get all the way to the end for the 3 points, but were unable to cap out in overtime or like a second round push because they had a significantly smaller time bank. Meanwhile, on the side of Mayhem Academy, Hagopyeon was playing the Roadhog, kind of in the standard like one support halt hook kind of comp that we see a lot of teams doing. And they had a much more significant time bank, were able to cap out the second round A and then got the win there. Volskaya, same thing. Shax on Widow was looking really, 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 really solid. Basically got like a couple of really key picks early on to start, and just like opened the door for the A caps. And then there was a really super smart switch after like the second time they went through, or let's just say first, the first time that they went through, they got really stalled up on B. Didn't really look like they knew exactly what they were doing, got kind of split up and picked off. But then the second time, they capped A with the Widow openings, and then immediately all ran to spawn, all switched to the Goats comp, and straight rolled on B the second round.
Oh yeah, and the thing to note here on that second round is when they take point A, it's actually in overtime. So there's no time left on the clock when it flips. So they get the 30 seconds, just as that courtesy 30 seconds, and they all go to their spawn and switch. And I mean, you don't really see that too often when you only have 30 seconds to get to the next point. You already have ultimate and charge built up. They go and they switch half of their comp, and then they literally go and stand in the middle of the point and say, "Come at me, bro." And just absolutely wreck second wind. It like they were down ult advantage. They had no time left. By the time they got to the point, I think there was like 7 seconds left on the clock. And then second wind just couldn't move them. Could not move them. It was because we saw earlier on Goats comp try to be used here and there, but it always failed. This was like a surprise. Guess what? We're throwing 3 giant bodies and 3 healers at you. You're not going to be able to do anything. So if you want to check that out, I would suggest going and watching the last section of this Volskaya match, because it was phenomenal to watch Mayhem pull off this 30-second cap.
Yeah, it was super cool. And that's where Mayhem Academy took the win on Volskaya, giving them the overall win. But now moving into Rialto, they're going to go for the 4-0. One of the things, Rialto is a weird map because it seems like teams aren't good at it yet. There's teams that are much more like even, but not one team is good enough at, especially at defending. It seems like this is a kind of a harder map to defend well. And I think that that'll come with time. People will learn where to stand, where to retreat back to, and where like your kind of key points are. But Second Wind had a pretty good push. They had Wub on the Hanzo get a 4K dragon off of Ginger's halt. So they did the dragon, and then the Orisa halt brought everyone into the area of effect of the dragon, killing a bunch of people. And so Second Wind are able to get their full cap. But then in kind of a polar opposite fashion, Mayhem Academy comes in and straight rolls through. I don't think they lost a single team fight. Maybe may have lost like 1 or 2 or 3 people overall. But they had a 5-minute time bank completing Rialto. Moving on into extra rounds was the most aggro defense I've seen in quite a while. They hold them basically on top of the bridge, which is hilarious. So obviously both teams got their second round because they both completed. And so since Second Wind had a way smaller time bank, they had to try to push with like a minute or so. and Mayhem Academy just held super duper far up. They barely got over the bridge, and then they got full wiped. So then Mayhem Academy had 5 minutes to get like 30 meters, which is a bit of a joke, and they did it, I think, like first round, instant got picks. I think they just ran straight tanks into them too, like with your Moira and all that stuff, just running into them and just killed everyone, and you're done.
Yeah.
So that was a 4-0 for Mayhem Academy over Second Wind. Second Wind not looking fantastic. I think they're 0-2.
Yes.
Yeah, they're 0-2 this week.
0-2. So that's going to take us down into the second match of the night, and that's GGEA versus Gladiators Legion. We both had this going to the Legion 3-2 because, remember, Optic Academy looked good Season 1.
They are the ones who beat Gladiators Legion out of playoffs as well, and kept Legion from going to Poland for the playoffs. Instead, GGA, formerly Optic, was the team who got there instead.
And today, the Gladiators Legion said, "Nah, we're gonna do this right," and they just 4-0'd them. They absolutely said, "You want to change your name? Nah, we're still your daddy." So what you got, Kyle?
This was a really, really interesting one. So this one started out on Oasis, as all the maps today did. But one of the things I wanted to note is the creation of what I'm dubbing the Legion comp. It is very unique in terms of the way you play it. It features a hero we have not really seen at all these last, basically 2 contender seasons and the last, 2 stages of Overwatch League.
Yep.
And that's Soldier 76. The Legion comp consists of Brigitte, Soldier, Zenyatta, Lucio, Diva, Winston. So it's like a standard dive, but you're using speed to engage with the Brigitte, and then you have a Soldier playing kind of far back, kind of doing your consistent damage. It's a super interesting comp. It works incredibly well, as the Legion will show here.
Oh, yeah. And something to bring up about that character that we don't see, we saw Corey playing Soldier 76, which is one of the reasons why this episode is named Corey in the House, because Corey was just going off on everything he played. But on Soldier, since we haven't seen it very much, he runs in, he gets a visor super quick, and then he goes crazy aggro and flanks around, pops visor, and proceeds to get a 4K as they hold the GGEA kind of not at their spawn, but that first set of doors leading off of the road. It's hard to explain. They just kind of stood there and walled it and just let him just bash into him for a couple minutes, and then they backed off and went back to the point. But Corey on Soldier 76 looks absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, Arrow kind of broke it down in that, with the Legion comp, what they were doing is basically holding corners. And so when playing into this, he basically said, check your freaking corners, because the Brigade can look around the corners. And so what they do is basically, as you come through a doorway, they just run into you, and the Brigade gets a good stun on a key target. And then you have Soldier outputting damage, Winston, Diva outputting damage, Brigade swinging on you with a Discord on you. You're done instantly. And so we did see GGEA be the first team to try to break this, which is always hard to do. It was like the first couple of teams that tried to beat the GOATS comp. They just looked completely flustered. So they end up switching to the GOATS comp as a counter comp, but then Legion counter the counter comp by going Pharaoh Junkrat, which is hilarious how much 4D chess is going on in this game. But in the end, it just catches GGEA way, way off guard, gets Gladiators the 2-0 on Oasis, moving into Eichenwald. Kind of different here. You can't exactly run it as well. So the Legion kind of got stalled until the very last minute on their attack, but then they swapped the GOATS comp and basically roll all the way through to C, where they were able to bypass the distance that GGA was able to make. But Keller was looking significantly better here than he was previously. There's a lot of like funky angles he was able to find, like playing in different spots that we don't see super typical, which allowed him to get really good picks because you're looking for widows in certain spots. If you've played Overwatch for the last like 2 years, you have a good idea of where widows stand. But when a player like Keller is like trying to mix that up, you are caught off guard, and if you're caught off guard as a widowmaker, you're dead. So good on him for kind of trying to find new spots to stand, essentially, and kind of use the element of surprise instead of just the pure aim 1v1.
Mm-hmm.
Then moving on into Volskaya, we saw a 3-2 in favor of Gladiators Legion. In the second round, we saw Corey. I mean, we see after the Legion is able to get capped on A the second time around, weren't able to cap out B. That meant that the Legion had to hold against GGEA. They had to hold them basically at A, or else they'd tie it. And they're lost, I think, 2 or 3, but then Corey gets like 3 picks in a row to just completely swing the momentum back in the Legion's favor, which is very much like a Corey thing to do. He's not like purely like the hard carry of this team, but he does have these moments of where like if someone needs him to step up, like if someone makes another mistake, he can kind of take that extra bit of slack and do, incredible things with it. So that's why Corey has kind of solidified himself as like one of the players I think is pretty set to probably an expansion team, if not like a midseason pickup.
Oh yeah.
But on the other side, we saw just an interesting thing is that Keller did the Raucous, where on the back platform of Volskaya Point A on defense, there's a little crack where if like it's like an L-shaped 90-degree corner where if you cut the corner, you fall straight down into the frozen ice bath, which kills you. And basically, it gave the Legion a 5v6 going into that and just straight rolled him after that. That was a really unfortunate misplay that just sucks to see.
Oh yeah, definitely. But he wasn't the only person to take a bath over in that corner. The Ponzer was playing Hog, and he was running away from the Gladiators Legion. And it was beautiful. He's like, "You're gonna kill me. I know I'm gonna die. I have 3 people coming right up behind me. But let me take one of you with me." He spins around a full 180, hooks Gods, and just flicks him off the side of the map. And then just dies as they take point A. It was hilarious.
Gods was super high charge as well. So
yeah, he was at like 97%.
Reset his charge on Zarya, which is a hugely momentum-based hero, and it's just resetting the momentum. And it was a great like I'm gonna die, but I'm gonna do some damage on the way out.
Oh yeah, it was phenomenal.
And then I don't know why I didn't have notes. I'm pretty sure I watched this. I just maybe forgot to put notes or erase it or something. But I had notes on Gibraltar.
I can probably run it down for you because
okay.
I don't have any notes either. The Legion full holds point A,
yeah.
and then proceeds to just roll right to the distance marker in a matter of like a minute and a half.
That's why I didn't have notes. It's because it was like literally I tabbed out for a second, checked Twitter, read a thing, and then the map was over. I'm like, oh, okay. So yeah, that was a 1-0. Okay, that's fair. But yeah, that's the second 4-0 of the night, moving into Fusion University versus LNL, which I had Fusion taking it 3-1. You gave LNL a bit more credit on a 3-2.
They had been looking better.
They had been looking better. But today was the day of 4-0s. And that's what happened here.
It was rough.
Starting out on Oasis, one of the things that I want to note here is this is, I believe, officially the first week that Who Are You and Alarm are in I think California with the Fusion University team. They are in here permanently now, not playing from Korea on like 150, 200 ping. So that is a thing to note here. Why you're going to see a bit better, a bit higher performances from Fusion University, but overall there were some weird things here. One of the things that like I've always kind of said that the Fusion tanks did really well is they really opened up a lot of space to give Zachary free shots. Because usually if a Widowmaker is doing well, it is because they have good tanks. The best Widowmakers in Overwatch League have phenomenal tanks to kind of clear space for them to give them the shots, as we've seen with like the addition of Fisher in the Gladiators, giving Surefour like a huge boon in terms of like if there's chaos, Widows take advantage of the chaos. So Beast, Halo, and Bernar did that pretty well. Unfortunately, Zachary just was not looking on his game these first couple of maps. And he misses a lot of like really obvious free shots, or like if it's like a Mercy flying through, he'll get like a body shot, but like, you know, if a Mercy is guardian angeling across the map, she'll get into cover pretty quickly. So if you hit a body shot, the next shot you can take, she's already gone.
Yep.
So that's kind of unfortunate. They were playing a little sloppy, but even still, they still 2-0'd on Oasis. Despite Dogman doing his darndest to try to kind of swing momentum back in the favor, but LNL just looked really scattered. Ajax was getting caught out quite a bit here and there. The tanks were playing split. Sugar Free was not doing Sugar Free things as much. And so that's what happened on Oasis. But King's Row, it gets a little bit more evenly matched. Sugar Free does his thing on Genji and straight destroys the entire team. Who Are You was playing a Junkrat. He deflects in a enclosed little hallway, does Sugar Free. It deflects a bunch of mines, kills the Mercy, kills the Zen. Team dives in, they kill the rest. It's like a straight 6-0 team fight. Now they have control of the payload, which is super cool. So they were able to get 3 points there, but then Who Are You on the Genji was doing kind of more consistent work, and were able to get his team to get the 3 points as well, going into overtime where LNL got held up, but Fusion University did not, partially due to the Doomfist that Zachary pulled out.
Oh yeah. But I wanna highlight something here. It's not anything that's like amazing. You know, it's not a sweet play by Zachary on Doomfist. If you go back to the second defense for Fusion University, I forget, I believe it was Sugar Free touches the point, pushing it into overtime, allowing them to, you know, start to try to stagger in. And if you just watch the stagger from that final last 10 seconds or so, it's everybody that has some sort of speed just diving into the point. And before they can actually get to the point, they die. So the only thing that hits their point is their dead body. And it's just like a rain of dead bodies, one after another, falling onto point A. It's actually really, really funny to watch. As weird as that sounds, but if you go back and you watch it, it's literally, it's like boom, a body. Oh, here's Tracer. Oh nope, Baby Diva flies out of the mech. Nope, she's dead by the time she hits the ground. Oh, here comes a monkey. Boom, Winston hits the ground. Just one of those funny things. I noticed a lot of very weird plays this week. Like, not even plays, just weird happenings throughout the week. So that's all I had on that one.
So then if we move on to Volskaya, we continue on with some other like interesting things. Fusion University, like, I don't know. I feel like they shouldn't have won a lot of these. I feel like they probably shouldn't have won Oasis with like, there's some carelessness there. Zachary missing a lot of shots. Same with Volskaya. I don't think they should have won Volskaya. Because LNL gets they cap both A and B with 5 minutes left in a time bank because they catch Fusion University kind of playing careless, is what my note says. Like, Zachary was going on weird flanks and was like literally behind the team at points, and then meanwhile his supports were dying and stuff like that. So it's just like Fusion University got kind of lazy here, or just like overzealous, and LNL was able to really take advantage of that.
And that's the thing, this whole series, LNL in their initial attacks looked phenomenal. Like, they did everything super quick. They did everything right. But it was I'm sorry. Fusion Fusion University. I have people distracting me. Fusion University are able to just secure it and come back and say, you know what, we let them steamroll us. We got to stop it. But what I had here is on the defense for the last night's leftovers. Point B. You hear I can't say it because it's way too long, but the Dragon Strike coming out of Who Are You? You hear the voice line, but then you look and there's no giant blue dragon flying around. That's because Nex swooped in and ate himself a dragon on the Diva. Nex, it was one of those things where it was really kind of the only thing to highlight, other than, you know, they were playing everything properly up until that point. But it was one of those plays where it's like he just knew to drop down and get right in front of Who Are You to eat that dragon. So definitely check out Nex playing on Volskaya for their defense.
And then on the opposite side with Fusion University, like they were able to get both, but they didn't have anywhere near as much time. But then they were still able to hold LNL and get their 3 points while LNL didn't get their 3. And Zachary again still missing easy shots here, but they were still able to get the win, so they're still up 3-0. They have the official match win. Moving on into Rialto, you know how the previous 3 maps was saying Zachary missed shots? Zachary didn't miss shots anymore. He just woke up. I think he even tweeted out took me 3 maps to get warmed up, but we still got the win. He straight just headshots everyone on their defense. Anyone tries to push in, they're done. I think this is both the tanks playing well as they have previously, but then Zachary it just clicks for him, and then he's able to do what the tanks were setting him up to do the previous 3 maps, which they probably shouldn't have won, but did just because Who Are You is pretty good at clutching stuff out, and LNL just kind of gets figured out after 1 round, I suppose.
Oh yeah. And if there's anything more than, one of those cheeky weird plays like a hog hook off the map or just dead bodies falling on the point, if there's anything that I like more than any of those, it's when we get to see a bloodthirsty Mercy. And we saw a bloodthirsty Mercy in our boy Elk. Elk just pops Valk and then pops off because he gets a 3K in Valk and just completely shuts down the attack. Because I think Fusion University
they lost a couple, yeah.
They were actually down 2, and then someone was running away because they were at almost no health. And nope, Elk's like, I got this, guys. Go heal up. I'm going to save you all. And he just starts wrecking people. Phenomenal. I love when we get to see Mercies just wreck whole teams. It's great.
And then I have a really in-depth, deep analysis note here for LNL on their attack and then later their defense. Is that they got wrecked. That is literally all my notes said. They just got completely dismantled and destroyed. Fusion University had them, play exactly where they wanted them to. Funneled them into the sights of the Widowmaker, killed everyone on the attack. Fusion just took everything they needed to, and then were able to cap out pretty quickly as well. So LNL looked really, really solid in the pit and the beat, but now they have just kind of fallen apart, at least to better team.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that they've fallen apart because they looked strong at moments. It was just when they had to close out the rest of the match, they couldn't secure that little bit of extra effort that they needed, basically. And then just something real quick about Rialto. We either see Rialto go into extra maps or extra rounds, first time through, both teams cap, they go into extra rounds. Or we see it held before the first, the first bridge over the gondolas. It never ends in between. It always ends either at the very very end or at that bridge. So I can't wait until all of the teams actually have it completely figured out and we can see like solid maps every time out of Rialto.
Yeah, absolutely. But that'll do it on our quick play. Moving on into our main discussion. One of the things that I wanted to talk about, one of the things that I wanted to break down was with the expansion teams coming in, what that meant for Contenders, because what would happen is we would lose a bunch of Contenders players, which is really good for the Contenders teams because now they're getting significantly better salaries and a bunch of other cool stuff. But what would that mean for like the way that Contenders is played out as a whole? So one of my notes here is that we have around 4 expansion teams to be expected here, which means with the new Overwatch League rules, you have 32 to 48 new players in Overwatch League, but 1 or 2 of those expected to field completely Korean rosters. Like you might pick up an Element Mystic, or you might pick up a Runaway. But you still have at least 16 to 24 NA/EU players to pick up. And you also have 4 more teams who could field academy rosters of their own. So do we see this becoming exclusively academy teams? We don't really know. Are we going to see...
Do we see, like, instead of 8 teams like we currently have, do we see it go up to 12 teams? Like, they could just make the bracket larger.
Exactly.
It's one of those things where it's new. We don't know how it's going to play out. Like, with Team Envy, when they picked up the Envision spot and then signed the former Envision roster, well, that used to not be an academy team slot. Well, now it's an academy team. One of the things that we see with the academy teams, and the owner of Envision stated this, is there's more support. Now, I'm not saying there's more support from Blizzard, because I don't think Blizzard is supporting the academy teams. Their org is supporting them. Well, guess what? If their org can afford to pay $20 million to put a team into the Overwatch League, I'm pretty sure they can afford to house, take care of their Contenders team that will allow them to focus on Overwatch. So what does that do, having more Contenders teams, to the whole path to pro? We see Open Division, teams playing Open Division. They get to come up and try to, take a spot from Contenders teams. A lot of these teams in the Open Division, I mean, these are either young kids that are in high school, just out of high school, or they're starting their first jobs. So they can't dedicate the type of time that's needed to compete with, say, an academy team. Could we see, like, more orgs leave?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering as well, because as it currently stands, right, looking at all of the teams, the top 8 teams out of the total 12 in all of Contenders right now, the top 8 for NA are all academy team. You got Legion, Fusion, Mayhem Academy, GGEA, NRG, XL2, Envy, and Toronto, all separate academy teams funneling players into the Overwatch League, whereas the bottom 4 teams currently are all no org / really, really small org. Like, I don't know what Skyfox's is considered to be, but I'm pretty sure Second Wind, LNL, and Byweek are all, like, literally run by the players.
Mm-hmm.
I think Skyfox's probably is as well. Maybe they are paying, but I don't necessarily think so. So does this mean that, like, Contenders becomes exclusively like minor league baseball as opposed to, like,
The
Open
to
Division,
pro.
which is yes. And what does that mean? Because we have seen, obviously, some teams are doing a bit better of picking up lesser known talent, but for the most part, pretty much every single player on all of these top 8 teams have played on another known Overwatch team previously. Very few of them have picked up new talent like your Sugar Freeze and your Boostios, who are really, really good, but just haven't played on big name teams yet. Whereas, you know, Tailspin played on a big team, Hagapin played on a big team, Buds played on a big team. All of these players have played on pretty notable teams, and so they're being picked up by these orgs because they know who they are. And so if Contenders becomes a pure what's the academy team only space, it's gonna be harder, I think, for these players to kind of make that jump.
Oh yeah.
But then it's also kind of real, we'll talk about this in a little bit about the difference between, like I mentioned, that the top teams are all the academy teams, the bottom teams are not. And so it's going to be kind of hard for these players. You can't really get up into tier 2 even. There's obviously it's difficult to get into tier 1 as it is, but now there's kind of a gateway almost for tier 2 for, your LNL, Skyfoxes type players to try to get into these much more financially stable academy teams.
And the way that the path to pro was kind of sold to us when it was announced, it was supposed to be a much smoother transition from, they don't use these exact terms, but a smoother transition from tier 3 to tier 2. You're supposed to be able to buy the game, play the game, get good at the game, find a team, find a better team, get noticed, go on to the Overwatch League. That's basically the way the trailer showed it to be. Well, if every spot in NA is held by an academy team that already has a ton of great talent, being paid to play, being financially supported, living in a team house, not having to worry about the day-to-day issues that, let's say, the GOATs have to worry about. Let's say LNL, Skyfoxes. Pick any of these bottom 4 teams, or any of the teams that didn't make it out of trials. They have a much harder time transitioning, even being able to beat the teams that literally just spend all their time playing. And we've already started to see it. Envision drops their roster, sells their spot. Simplicity, before they even go into trials, drop out, giving their spot to an open division team. The Grizzlies, the Grizzlies don't make it out of trials. They've, last I heard, released at least half of their team, I believe all of their team, but it hasn't been fully announced yet. These are teams that had money behind them, but they didn't have the type of money that the academy teams have, and now they're slowly going away. I don't think that it's a good thing for just the path to pro scene as a whole.
Yeah, it's definitely less in CSGO, you see teams kind of come out of nowhere. And these are teams not just your last night's leftovers, a bunch of people friends playing together to try to make it big. You see orgs come and go from prominence. You don't see that as much in Overwatch League because the scene is much more, I think, stable, and that's both good and bad. Obviously, it's good because you don't have players getting dropped and picked up by teams a bunch, but you also don't have as much variance in who the teams are at the moment. There's less people who can kind of make a big name for themselves, win a tournament, and then get picked up by a better team. And so it's just a bit of an interesting thing, a bit of an interesting concept of the fact that there are no endemic orgs, essentially, any non-related to an Overwatch League team orgs left anymore. And it's probably going to be that way for a while until something significant is done. But then kind of my last thing I wanted to talk about here was kind of the imbalance between the groups, which I found hilarious. So obviously there's there's an imbalance between your upper tier and lower tier in that, like, it seems like for the most part, the non-academy teams are only winning against academy teams, whereas pretty much the academy teams are winning against non-academy teams consistently. That is an interesting trend, as well as the fact that Group B seems significantly more stacked with teams than Group A does. We saw Mayhem Academy and GG Esports Academy both look kind of not that great in this first 2 weeks, whereas Gladiators Legion and Fusion University have looked pretty good as well. I think the only team that is definitively really, really, really good in this seems to be Gladiators Legion, with Fusion looking really good, but I think that's only because they played both LNL and Second Win these first two.
Yep.
Yeah, and so, like, what does that necessarily say for your record? Not a ton yet. Wait until you play Gladiators, wait until you play Mayhem, wait until you play GGEA. Whereas it looks to be like Toronto, Envy, Excel2, and NRG are all kind of along the same tier as Gladiators Legion is. And so what does that mean for when playoffs come around? Well, it means that two really good teams from Group B are probably not going to make it, I don't think, which is really unfortunate to see. If that is how playoffs are done, I don't remember how they're doing playoffs again, but I'm hoping that it doesn't matter, like, you can have 3 from Group B and 1 from Group A, as long as they're the 4 best teams in the league as a whole.
No, I think it was even from both sides. It was 2 and 2.
Okay.
If I'm sorry, not 2 and 2. It was 3 and 3. I would have to pull up the old notes, but yeah, there's going to be a top tier team that won't make it to playoffs. Yeah, they won't get relegated. They won't have to go to trials, but we're not going to see them at LAN.
I think, okay, so last season, the groups did play on the quarterfinals of the playoffs. They did interplay, and that's where we saw, because the Gladiators Legion and Optic were not in the same groups, but that is where Optic were able to beat out Gladiators. So that will happen again. So we will see there will be crossplay for the playoffs. So that's maybe where we will see that happen. But I think, statistically speaking, the way it will fall, actually, maybe not. I don't know. I think that it is probably going to work out then in the more competitive way, I think, if that's how they do it. But that is all I have for that.
And that's going to wrap up the main discussion. I know first time in a long time the main discussion went longer than the quick play. That was because we had half of the matches this week. So we're going to go into our speculation station here, where we've already kind of covered the July 12th matches. Those are the matches that are played tomorrow. But because of the new schedule, it's going to be kind of wonky on the show this first 2 weeks. So next week we will actually be covering the July 12th and July 17th matches. That is the Thursday, Tuesday matches. So just a real quick recap of our predictions for the July 12th matches. We both had Toronto Esports beating the Sky Foxes 3-1. We both had Team Envy beating XL2 3-2. And then we both had bye week falling to NRG 4-0. And those are for the matches on July 12th. So on July 17th, we have last night's leftovers versus the Gladiators Legion. And we both have this going the way of the Gladiators Legion 4-0. And then on our second match, we have Fusion University against Mayhem Academy. This is where we're going to kind of see what Fusion really has going for them, because they've only played trials teams so far. But we both have this going to the Fusion University 3-1, and the final match for the 17th is Second Wind versus GG Esports Academy, and I'm not betting on Second Wind this time. We both have GG Esports Academy taking this 3-2. Kyle, why don't you take the 19th?
So on July 19th, we have another non-surprising Team Envy 4-0 over bye week. That's what we are calling. Bye week has just not looked super fantastic. Team Envy has, but we don't know necessarily how fantastic. But we can guarantee pretty much that they will beat bye week definitively. The next map here is our Toronto Esports versus NRG matchup. That is the only one we have a split on this entire week and a half. You have Toronto Esports taking it 3-2. I have NRG taking it 3-2. We both agree this is going to go to 5. Both teams have looked absolutely incredible so far. It really comes down to just essentially it's almost a flip of the coin, but like whoever is better at that map pick and however the maps fall in terms of who gets to pick the 5th map.
And whether or not NRG pulls Rascal for map 5.
Right. Maybe, yeah, because Rascal, it seemed like for this last time, it was purely just Rascal not looking on, not hitting his shots, not being, on his game like he was the previous couple of maps. So if that does happen, then I can definitely see it going Toronto's way. But it really, if you can get Rascal to stay on his game, I can see them taking that. Final map is Skyfoxes versus XL2. We think that with these new players in for Skyfoxes, they're going to look better, but not good enough just yet to take out XL2. So we have this going XL2's way 3-1.
That is going to wrap it up for us this week. We have no community intel this week. So if you could just swing by the Twitch channel, give us a follow over there, and then once you're done doing that, head on over to iTunes. You can find the show, and then just give us a little review. 1 star, 5 star, anything in between, we'll take it, and we'll read your review live on the next week's show. But with that, where can they find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter and Twitch at Kyle the Winner, KYLETHEWYNNER.
And you can find me over on Twitter at Thornrayne. I'm also on Twitch at Thornrayne, but I do most of my streaming over here on the Blackwatch Reports channel. You can find the show on Twitter at Blackwatch Report. There is no O in report. You can email the show, blackwatchreport@gmail.com, and you can follow the show on Twitch at twitch.tv/blackwatchreport. We record live Wednesdays, 6 p.m. Eastern. Our intro music is the main theme for Overwatch, covered by our very own Kyle Wynn. This has been a High Noon production. You can find all of our shows over at highnoonpodcast.com, and you can come and chat with all of the hosts over at the Discord at discord.me/highnoonpodcast. And with that, Blackwatch out.